of them, not the worst parts, the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello, and that's it. No more Mr. Nice Duck. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at comic book movies that were poorly received upon release, but only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's sometimes a challenge, but always a good time. And this week, we are talking Howard the Duck. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the anthropomorphic comic book expert himself, Andrew Williams. You ready to dive into this one, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm ready to spread my wings and dive into Howard the Duck.
Yeah. This is what a movie. What a movie, man.
Of all the movies that exist, this is certainly one of them.
It certainly is. It's Marvel Comics, and technically their first theatrical movie. There were some serials back in the 40s, but the first full-length theatrical release, first adaptation of a Marvel comic book, Howard the Duck. This movie made history.
Yeah, that's certainly a way to look at it, yeah.
Well, what is your history with this movie? Have you seen it before? Obviously, you didn't see it in theaters. This one's a little bit older than we are, but did you grow up with it? Did you see it at all?
I did not grow up with this. I did not see this. This was 86, so I came about a year after this. Wasn't really cognizantly aware of any of this. This was not a movie that my parents had around for good reason after kind of watching it. But no, this is not something that I grew up with. This is something that, like, I know I've seen it before, because, like, watching it back, I was like, all right, yeah, this is all coming back to me. So, like, I guess, like, when you're knee deep in comics and you've got 30 long boxes that threaten to destroy you, and you're watching and absorbing pretty much every single piece of comic book media you can, this ends up coming in at some point. So yeah, I know I've watched it before, but not in years at this point. It's probably been close to, if not over, a decade since I've watched it, because it was something that was kind of hard to find for a while. But yeah, it's not a huge part of my life in any regard, really.
Well, it is now. You're about to create an episode of a podcast all about this movie. I had never seen this movie before. This week was the first time I sat down and watched it. I was certainly aware of it. I was aware of its reputation. I remember my parents talking about it. Like, there was this Howard the Duck. It's a weird movie. It's about, like, a duck that walked around the city. Like, that's honestly, the reputation I've heard isn't even that this movie's bad. It's that it's just so weird that it even exists. And now that I've seen it, I've got to agree with that completely. It is so weird. I can't wait to talk about it.
We'll save it for the show, but yeah, it's just so weird.
Yeah, we're going to talk all about this movie, specifically what it does well, the high points, the positives. That is what we do on this podcast. Like I say in the intro, it's sometimes a challenge. This one might be a little bit tough, but we have some help, because this week we will be joined by Preston Willke of the Level Zero podcast, one of my favorite podcasts out there. I'm so happy he's going to be on with us a little bit later to talk all about this movie. In other news, be sure you come back next week, where we will be talking about Punisher Warzone, the pseudo follow-up to the Thomas Jane Punisher movie. That's not really a sequel. It's kind of a reboot that most people have probably forgotten about, but we're going to revisit and talk about all the things that movie does well. And the following Saturday, the Saturday after Punisher Warzone, in the Best of the Rest Discord, we are going to be watching The Punisher 1989. That is the adaptation starring Dolph Lundgren. That, speaking about movies that have been forgotten about,
yeah,
by golly, this is technically the first Punisher movie known mostly for Dolph Lundgren not wearing the iconic skull. It's so bizarre that you had to adapt the character and not do like his defining look. But he's still playing Frank Castle. It's the Punisher. It's the story. I've seen this movie once, years ago. I mean, years and years ago. I couldn't tell you much about it, so it'll be interesting to revisit with all of you guys. So if you haven't already, check out the link in the episode description. Jump into that Discord. If you've never used Discord before, just take the plummet. It's super friendly, super fun. Come in, say hi to us. It's just a place where we can all get together, hang out, and talk about movies and other interests. And again, Saturday, December 11th, we will be watching The Punisher together. Andrew, you looking forward to that?
I am. That's another one that I've not revisited in some time because there's better Punisher movies to watch. But no, it's another one that's kind of strange that they were like, we're going to make a Punisher movie, but we're going to kind of ditch all the, popular iconography associated with the character to kind of instead make it a little, you're taking away the thing that makes it unique in a way. So,
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm looking forward to diving into that.
We look forward to watching it with you guys. Be sure you jump in there. But today, it's all about Howard the Duck, the movie that was released August 1st of 1986, made on a budget of $35 million, was an absolute bomb at the box office worldwide, just pulls in $38 million, certainly not covering all of its costs when you factor in marketing and other factors. So not making many waves with audiences and not making much of an impact with critics. Rotten Tomatoes has it at just a 14% critical score. Critically panned. I mean, that is one of the lowest scores we've seen on this show. So nobody was saying very nice things about this movie when it came out.
No, not particularly. This is not like you mentioned earlier. The reputation of this movie is not. It's like, I don't know if I'd say it's negative, but it's certainly not positive. It's certainly not a movie that anybody is claiming is some misunderstood classic.
Now, the movie is written by Willard Huyck and Gloria Katz, husband and wife duo that were known for working closely with George Lucas, who was an executive producer on this movie and a big reason that it happened in the first place. The movie's directed technically by just credited to Willard Huyck. Before this, like I said, a lot of collaborations with George Lucas, working on movies like American Graffiti, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and the Temple of Doom, before both writing and directing Howard the Duck.
Yep. So yeah, at that point, a working relationship definitely existed, and this was something Lucas had been interested in doing for some time, apparently all the way back on even his American Graffiti days. He was interested in doing this, which is odd because Howard the Duck debuts right around the same time as American Graffiti comes out. So I'm not sure what the timeline is there, but yeah, it's an odd passion project, to say the least.
All the comic book characters that existed in the 80s, and this is the one he clings on to.
This is the one Star Wars George Lucas wants to do. It's been, if you're talking 73, that's a decade plus of being interested in trying to bring this to the screen. So props for finally getting there.
And though the duo doesn't have an official credit on Star Wars, they did do a bit of what they call script doctor work on that, and Gloria Katz specifically gets a lot of credit for improving the dialogue of those first Star Wars movies and really shaping the character of Princess Leia. Sadly, Gloria Katz no longer with us, passed away in 2018, so R.I.P. Gloria.
Yep.
Now, Andrew, I watched this movie, like I said, the first time this week in glorious 4K, ultra high definition. Earlier this year, for the 35th anniversary, this movie was released on 4K. This movie that bombed at the box office, that has a horrible critic score, that most people simply say is just weird, has a 4K release.
It does.
You know what doesn't have a 4K release? Terminator is not available on 4K. Aliens, not on 4K. Christopher Nolan has movies that are not available on 4K. But Howard the Duck, you can buy it on ultra high.
They're going for the cream of the crop, man. Clearly, that's clearly what they're going for. No, yeah, I remember when you told me it had a 4K, I didn't believe you. I was like, you're lying to me. Like, there's no way. I ended up buying it during a sale for like $5, and I was like, what is going on? Like, how do we live in this timeline where Willard has the time to approve a 4K of Howard the Duck, but James Cameron can't take a break and authorize his movie?
I could see every feather on his body, and I don't know if I'm better for it. Yeah. All right, let's jump into this movie. Let's bring on our guest. On a planet known as Duck World, a 4-foot-tall duck named Howard enters his apartment and flips through channels on the TV. It's not long before he is mysteriously sucked into the sky and launched into outer space. After he makes a crash landing in Cleveland, he quickly befriends Beverly, the lead singer of a local rock band, and she agrees to help Howard return home with the help of a neurotic lab assistant named Phil. When the device that was intended to send Howard home instead brings an evil, dark overlord to Earth and into the body of Dr. Jennings, Howard and the gang embark on a journey to stop the overlord's evil plan, dodging the police and the crazed public along the way. Eventually, Howard must choose between returning to his home planet or saving his new one. What a story. What an operatic space opera plays out in this movie, huh?
Just the classic American story, really.
It just, this movie just on paper, like you read it, I don't blame you if like you kind of like zoned out halfway through that story and then came back and like, wait, Dark Overlord, what is this? That's kind of the feeling of watching the movie.
Yeah, it's first off, this movie's kind of long. I was actually surprised at how long it is.
It approaches 2 hours, which I kind of consider over 2 hours a long movie. Like you better be doing something to justify that run time.
So like I remember like when we'll talk about it more later, but like there's a moment where I was like, oh, we got to be entering like the end game, like the final part of the movie. I was like, I'm 50 minutes in.
50 minutes. I did the exact same thing because like we'll get to it. We'll get to it. Yeah. Before we jump into it, of course, jumping into all of the positives of this movie, all the things it does well, all the things that we like. That's what we do on this podcast. #PositivityPodcast. Before we do all that, we've got to introduce our guest. He's here in the studio, just sitting in the corner. Preston, come on over here. We have Preston Willke, co-host of the Level Zero podcast and the Trivia Punks podcast. A very busy man. Thank you for making time to come be on our show, Preston.
Ahoy hoy. Thank you for having me on. I am so excited to be talking about Howard the Duck and all the good things.
I mean, you're a lifelong fan of this movie, right? I mean, you watch it every week, I think you were telling me.
Yeah. It's something that I grew up on, unfortunately. It's what has caused all... Never mind. It's been great. I actually just watched it the other night, and there's a lot packed into that first 50 minutes, like y'all were saying.
I believe you'll watch it for the first time ever, right? From our conversation?
Yes. Yeah, I had never seen it before. And honestly, if it weren't for this show and being on the podcast, I probably would have gone my entire life without ever seeing it. And I am kind of grateful, though, that
I was going to say, I don't know if I should say you're welcome or I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I walked away from it feeling like more of a person. And I don't know if that's more of a good person, more of a bad person, but definitely more. And so... I'm glad that I watched it, though.
We leave as changed people. You leave this movie knowing what a topless duck looks like, and that's something that sticks with you forever. I'll tell you what.
Can't unsee that. But look, we're going to talk all about it. Of course, like I said, the positives. Preston, you know this. You've heard the show before. It's a #PositivityPodcast. We just want to know about what works in the movie. The movies that we talk about, this one being no exception, are mostly, believe it or not, critically panned. And if you search the internet for conversations about the movie, all they're doing is tearing it apart and giving it some kind of review and score. Not interested in any of that. We're digging through this, sifting through the film, bringing you all the positives, and we're starting with the cast. Specifically, we're going to start at the high point with the best performance in the movie. We're searching for one actor or actress that goes so far above and beyond the call of duty. Their performance is raising the quality of the entire film. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, let's start with you. Who gets your Mark Strong Award in Howard the Duck?
I am giving it to Leah Thompson as Beverly Switzler.
You said that with such confidence. I think it's a good pick.
Such confidence. I think so. She is completely on board with what's happening here. She throws herself into it. There's no feelings that maybe she's kind of phoning this in. There's no feelings that she's like not dedicated to this. This is after Back to the Future, which seems like an odd move, you could say, but she's into this. And there's a charisma somehow between her and Howard that still manages to come through, even though she's basically acting opposite a guy essentially in a duck suit.
Yeah.
And they make some switches to the character, but I think they mostly work within the context they're going for here. But yeah, I think she's got a good energy. She definitely picks the movie up. She makes a good foil to all the people on screen, because there are some There's some wild characters in this movie that I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. But she sits right in there with them, no issues. And yeah, I think she is definitely, as far as I'm concerned, she was the standout.
I agree with you 100%. I'm giving it to Leah Thompson as well. I think she does. I mean, it really can't be overstated how difficult that's got to be to have charisma with a puppet on set. And on set, like the voice that we hear in the Ventral movie is not what she was hearing on set. It was like a fill-in voice from the director or somebody on set. And the animatronics are constantly changing. I mean, it was a mess to be on set. But she comes across just super happy to be there. Like you feel like she's a pretty perky character, and it's all feels pretty genuine. Which again is just
wild.
Had to be difficult to do. And she was asked to do some bizarre stuff in this movie. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Don't worry, we're gonna get there. But she did it fully committed and not at all, within your reservation. She was all in and still somewhat of a fan of the character to this day, which is always nice to see.
Agreed.
Preston, how about you? Mark Strong Award, who you got?
I was going to go with every goon in the movie. Like all of the B-side goons, they all really go into it, especially early on when Leah Thompson's Beverly was being kind of like attacked in the alleyway. Those guys are really weird and all over the place.
I think that's the one.
Leah Thompson.
Okay. So you go officially to Leah Thompson.
Officially to Leah Thompson.
We'll do a micro Mark Strong Award over to the gangs of Cleveland, I think is a good way to sum that up. I think one of the guys in that scene you're talking about attacks her, like he has like a leather vest and like faces of a baby doll on his vest. I mean, there's some wild stuff in the costuming of this movie, but they put the street punks from Terminator to shame. Bill is it Bill Pullman or Bill Paxton and Terminator, Andrew?
Paxton.
I
hate you. I hate you so much. Hashtag positivity podcast. No one confuses them.
I gotta remember.
No one.
Paxton. Okay, Bill Paxton, Terminator is definitely like a street gang dude, but they dial that up to 11 in this movie.
Yeah, whenever you get to sort of like the guys in the diner later, like they're really selling their anger and their that sort of down south rough and tumble kind of act, and it's really
like you find in Cleveland,
like you find in Cleveland, right? It's all really silly, and they do everyone like gives it their all, like it's going to be their only campy. Well, it probably is their only campy role, but yeah, Leah Thompson, like y'all have been saying. Apparently, Ed Gale wasn't allowed to even say his lines. Chris, like you were saying, there was someone coming in from the side saying the lines out loud to Leah Thompson. So as she was speaking to Howard the Duck, to Ed Gale in the suit of Howard the Duck, she wasn't actually hearing him speak. She was having to speak based off of those lines, and she did an awesome job. She sells it. I was thinking about giving the Mark Strong Award to Ed Gale as the Howard the Duck suit performer, because more so than the voice, the physicality and what he was able to do with how little the duck is able to, the faces are able to move and how little expressions it's able to give. He did a great job of making it a more believable performance, but y'all are totally right. Leah Thompson takes it easy.
Yep. Leah Thompson. But let's talk about who brought Howard the Duck to life. It was, of course, the character like this, a team of people. So like I said, Ed Gale's the main guy in the suit. Now, Ed Gale is a legend in the industry. He has over 130 credits to his name. Most high profile, maybe playing Chucky in the Child's Play movies, but he's been in a ton of other stuff. Just look at that filmography. It's very impressive. Another in-suit performer for some of the scenes was Jordan Prentice, who was only 13 at the time. But Jordan Prentice, I know from the movie In Bruges, which I thought was fun that he popped up there. So if you've seen In Bruges, Colin Farrell has a pretty a funny run-in with his character. I won't spoil it for you, but you should check out that movie. If you haven't seen In Bruges, you're sleeping on it. It's hilarious.
Oh, yeah. Greatest Christmas movie of all time.
I don't know if that's a hot take or not.
That's a take.
Okay. Yeah, so those are our in-suit performers. We also have tons of puppeteers working on that face and other animations. Tim Rose, Steve Sleep, Peter Baird, Mary Wells, Lisa Sturz, all various puppeteers, and their credits go across Muppet movies all the way up through Team America. I saw some of their credits. So very high profile people, best in the business, bringing our duck to life. What do you guys think about some of the criticisms I've seen about this movie are about Howard the Duck's look and animatronics. And I'll say personally, like, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, when I watch that movie, I don't see a puppet or man performer. I see a Ninja Turtle. It might be because I've watched those movies since I was 3 years old. I don't know if that... And I saw Howard the Duck for the first time as a grown adult, so maybe it's harder for me to get that mindset. But it never quite clicked in that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle territory for me. But still impressive animatronics. I noticed all the different things that move on him. His eyelids, his eyebrows. There's a lot of movement in the face. Feathers on top of his head in one scene. But what do you guys think about that duck?
I mean, you clearly know that, like I said, with the turtles, it very much does create like a seamless sense of like, I know that's not a real giant turtle standing there, but you still get that immersion. You don't quite get that here, but like you said, I don't know if that's just because I've watched those movies my entire life and my brain is like filtering out anything that might shatter the illusion. Whereas with this, it's just very much like I certainly thought it looked better than its reputation suggested. I kind of went into this thinking he was going to look like really bad, and there's
like a Chuck E. Cheese animatronic or something.
Yeah, like a Five Nights at Freddy's thing, just waiting to like murder me. But like there's only one or two scenes, and it's when they like try to show him like completely, where it like really kind of shines through. But like most of the scenes, I'm like, this looks fine. Like I didn't think it looked particularly like jarring. We're already watching a movie about Howard the Duck, and making some very, very strange jokes about it. So like I said, is it the greatest of all time? Certainly not, but I certainly don't think it's as bad as the reputation suggests.
Yeah, I think it's got those full body scenes, like early on, they show his hands, like he holds his hands up, like, no, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
And it's just so weirdly, clearly gloves. But Andrew, like you're saying, like, we're watching a Howard the Duck movie. It's easy to suspend disbelief just because we understand that and maybe it's that we know this far removed from whenever it was released. We are going into it expecting really, really bad. And so whenever it is like semi-okay, we're able to say, like, okay, I'm just going to gloss over that look entirely because I'm glossing over half of this movie entirely. But the look of it, the eyebrows and stuff are all, he has basically 5 looks throughout, where his eyebrows will raise up or his eyebrows will furrow. And that's about all he's got between his eyebrows. And
he's got the range of Mark Wahlberg.
Then those all work to good effect, but it is only about 5 different looks that he's able to use throughout. But those looks are very well animated.
Yes.
Look at that.
An excellent way to put it.
Hashtag PP. Preston gets it. One other person we got to mention for Howard the Duck is Chip Zien, who is the voice of Howard. Again, his lines weren't recorded until later, so it's very strange that he being Howard, was on set speaking the line someone else's voice, and then he comes in and matches up to the duckbill movements. It's pretty bizarre. In fact, some other actors were considered. Robin Williams actually worked on the movie briefly before departing because he said, like, I can't do this. Like, first of all, I don't think there's an animatronic in the world that could keep up with Robin Williams and his pace and his zany way of bouncing all over the place. If you're not just
making him a cartoon, don't even bother.
Right. But Chip Zien does a fine job. He really plays him like a straight down the middle, just like an everyman, which I think is what they're going for with this character, just an average Joe that happens to be a duck. Chip Zien has been in the industry, still working to this day.
Yeah, still working today, yeah.
He's in a show called Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist that friend of the show, my wife, really enjoys, so she is familiar with this guy.
Yeah, I think he, like you said, they're very much presenting Howard as like this. I mean, it feels weird to call him an everyman, but like it's
an every duck.
He's meant to an every duck. Like, you know, he's not. We're not going super over the top, like with his mannerisms, with his speech. We're keeping it pretty down the middle. We're going very much just duck out of water scenario here, and It's and I think I think he's fine. Like, would I say it's one of the greatest voice performances of our time? Probably not. But it's also that kind of thing where like you're coming in after the fact, and I can't imagine even that is particularly easy to not be able to kind of feel the energy of the set or whatever. So Chip coming in to do it, certainly not an easy task, and I think he does a fine job.
Yeah, I think I thought it was a good, like, streetwise performance. The sort of sarcastic. Is it necessarily what I thought would be Howard the Duck? From what I know, my limited knowledge of the character from the comics, like, probably not. But I don't think that's necessarily that's not Chip. That's the writing.
Right.
And so I think he does a capable, if not good, job with what he's given.
Guys, Tim Robbins is in this movie. Best of the Rest alum, Tim Robbins. I talked about him.
That is the exact same statement you made when we were talking about Green Lantern. Guys, Tim Robbins is in this movie.
Given the premise of our show, I just don't expect to talk about Tim Robbins, not once, but twice. I don't know what it is about Tim Robbins. He has like this prestige about him. Like, it's like Daniel Day-Lewis coming up on our show sometime. Like, I just don't expect it to happen. I don't expect to talk about his performance. Now, granted, this is extremely early in Tim's career. It's before he developed that reputation. It's one of his first film roles. So he's not quite the Shawshank Redemption, Tim Robbins yet. But I really like his performance here. He is going all in with the goofiness and the neuroticness and zaniness. And he's got almost like Kramer energy and hair sticking up.
If he were in the movie more, he very much would have had a chance to take my Mark Strong. Just because, like, in his early appearances, he's kind of like, as the movie goes on and him and Howard are teaming up, trying to save Beverly and everything. Like, he just, like, he's in. He's no questions, no issues. He's running with it. And like you said, it's so weird because if you look at Tim Robbins' early movies, it's stuff like Fraternity Vacation and like all these things that you can clearly tell are just like low budget, like trash comedies. Kind of like how George Clooney was in like Revenge of the Killer Tomatoes, that sort of thing, where you're like,
a paycheck.
You'd never imagine them now based off of this prestige they have about them, where it's like, oh, George Clooney doesn't just do any movie. Tim Robbins doesn't just do any movie. But there was certainly a time where they did, and so it's always weird to like I'm legit watching it and like I'd forgotten that he was in it. Like I know I've watched this before. But like his name came up, and I was like, "What? In this economy? What is Tim Robbins doing here?" And like, this is like literally the same year he's in Top Gun. It's so strange.
Yeah, I thought he was great. I thought that I wasn't a huge fan of the character, but I don't think you're supposed to be necessarily.
Yeah, he definitely wants to. Well, it's kind of weird. He kind of wants to exploit Howard, but not really in the most evil, sadistic way. He's just excited about the implications of an alien that's a duck and what it can mean for his research and future, but he doesn't want to, like, kill him or dissect him. So it's a weird kind of middle ground. I don't know if we're supposed to like him too much or not.
And he makes it very clear, like, Howard, I could be killing and dissecting you right now. Yeah. A worse person than me would be killing you and dissecting you.
Yeah. And be so grateful I'm not killing you.
Yeah, he keeps bringing it up. And so he does go all in, and he really like pushes that performance to be that kind of weird, annoying, neurotic character, but it works. In the end, you do end up kind of liking him. And yeah, I thought Tim Robbins was good.
This is as long as this movie is, nearly 2 hours, and as wild as the story can be, it's a very tight scope on the cast. The only other major player here is the character of Dr. Jennings, who the actor that portrays him since this movie was convicted of some pretty heinous things. So I don't want to sit here and praise this actor's performance, but the character they play, Dr. Jennings, is a crucial role in the movie. It is the doctor that is, I guess you could say, possessed by the Dark Overlord from outer space and starts to mutate his body into a monster and becomes our main villain. Lots of really cool makeup effects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's also, the doctor is the one who's inadvertently responsible for bringing Howard to our planet in the first place. So, yeah, an integral character, but we can leave it at that.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have the cast of Gangs of Cleveland, which we don't need to go through all 20 of their names or whatever they are, but memorable characters as Preston was
Yeah, there's a
speaking
bunch of
about.
like random like brief characters that I remembered from like other movies. Like one of the parking attendant guys from Ferris Bueller plays one of the goons, and the dad from the movie Carpool, and like the cop from CS. Like just random people where I was like, how are you all in this movie? Like it was like Howard the Duck through like the prism of which you all like exploded as actors. But yeah, it's very, very strange. But generally all of those people are just like brief one-offs. Like very few people appear for like more than a couple of scenes outside like Howard, Beverly, Phil, and Dr. Jennings. Almost everybody else is just a few scenes at most.
It's almost a road trip movie. Like, not quite. They kind of just stay in the same city, but it moves from scene to scene. You got a lab, a diner, a chase through the city with an aircraft. I mean, it's not, like I said, not quite a road trip movie, but the scenery is changing so much that you don't really have space for too many recurring characters.
Right. It's a road trip through Cleveland.
In the second half. That first half, it's all very localized.
Yeah, we're all like pretty much in 3 locations.
We're at the club, at her apartment, or the lab. Yeah.
And then that second half is, it's a very, very much a suburban road trip.
All right, well, let's jump into these scenes that we're talking about. Specifically, we're going to start with the best scene of the movie, what is our favorite scene of the movie, and when we think the movie is just firing on all cylinders. So, Andrew, let's start with you. What is the best scene in Howard the Duck?
I'm going to go with the extended diner fight, showdown, face-off thing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's I don't know what to call it. Okay, we're all in agreement here.
It's just this wild, ridiculous scene where a bunch of people like are trying to like season and cook Howard alive while like this evil villain is like slowly descending into madness, and like all of his powers are like starting to finally take root, all the while they're arguing over who should take this like key card that's going to activate the laser. It's like there's so many like weird things on paper, but like all of this strange action, and the people at the diner are just like so hell-bent on eating Howard. It's so strange, and the movie never really like dials into the gravity of that situation. Like it never really is like makes an urgency about it whatsoever. But it's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's when the energy in the movie, I think, is at its highest. The aftermath of this scene is where Tim Robbins kind of makes his face turn, where he like agrees with Howard that he's like, we got to go save Bev from this thing that Dr. Jennings has become. And the scene where like Tim Robbins is like getting out of that cop car just made me laugh for some reason, where he's like, there's no handle on the inside. So he like dives up through the front window of the car to like slide out, and Howard's like, or we could try the door, and just opens the door. Just one of those like needless like scenes of physical comedy where I was like, all right, you went for it, Tim Robbins. I'm
and
into
then
it.
he's handcuffed for like the rest of the movie.
For like the next the next 30 minutes he's handcuffed. He never, like the whole time they're on the plane he's handcuffed. But that whole sequence where it's like I said, it's this like kind of slow descent into madness, and then it just like blows up in like a Looney Tunes kind of way where like they're trying, like I said, they're literally like putting celery in Howard's mouth and stuff like that. It's ridiculous. But that was when I thought, I was like, all right, if the movie is firing on all cylinders, it's certainly right now, because it's our narrow cast, but like we're leaning into all those other things. But I was having a good time watching this scene in particular.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the one of the parts of the scene where they are really getting ready to chop him up, and you say they put the celery in his mouth, there was an extra in there. The direction must have been like, throw the food, throw whatever garnishes you would have with Duck around him. But one person just like sprinkles lettuce and no one else does anything. And I really got to give it to that person that like at least tried. There's just a little sprinkling of lettuce and then the celery, and then they almost chop him. And everyone is really going all in, and it's the combination of those extras that are being really strange and over the top, plus the body horror that is just now first introduced from Dr. Jennings. There's like that giant tentacle thing, I think, first comes out at this point, or is that a little bit later? But the giant tentacle
in the car ride after this, it starts coming out of his mouth. but
Oh, that's
he-
right. Okay.
He like his cheekbones start, his eye sockets sink in. He starts getting these weird cheekbones during the scene, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
he's
just
like
disintegration of
slowly
his
morphing.
body.
It's
Yeah.
very very unsettling. Like it's actually
Yeah.
like very much like I'm like this is first off, it's pretty gnarly. Like it looks pretty good,
Mhm.
but like it's genuinely something where I was like, ew, like you look gross, dude.
Yeah, they do such a good job of they'll come back to Dr. Jennings, and it's like every time they come back, it's a little bit more progressed.
Right.
Yeah.
Rather than it being one big jump or even like every third time it returns to him, it's every single time there's a little bit of a progression to that makeup and to that sort of that disintegration of his self.
Yeah, the hair goes from like Christopher Walken to Albert Einstein. Like
Yeah.
it just keeps standing up more and more. I agree though. My favorite scene in the movie is definitely this diner scene. Excuse me, not just any diner. Joe Roma's Cajun Sushi Diner.
Yes.
What a theme. All of the waitresses, they're like typical 50s style diner waitresses, but they have a bandana with the Rising Sun emblem on it.
Like a hibachi chef type hat. Like a weird, like so strange.
But then when they order the special, it's just like Denny's. It's just like some eggs and hash browns. Which, of course, Howard is repulsed by the idea of eating eggs. Can't blame him, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if it's one thing that I would imagine a duck wouldn't eat, it would probably be egg.
I was wondering.
Well, those
about
are
that.
chicken eggs, though, right? Wait a
Right,
minute.
right. I was thinking the same thing. Like, I guess it would be like us eating like our closest relative on the tree. Like there's
monkey brains.
Yeah, like
which people do eat. It's very to
But
be
I
fair
don't know
though,
if I
people do
would.
eat it. It's very strange. I can't
I
say
mean-
I would either.
Yeah.
But why? I mean, veal.
I don't think I would
is
eat
a-
anything's brain, to be fair. Like I think brain is where I draw the
Yeah.
line.
But no
Veal
one tries
is
to
a
make that
baby
argument.
mammal,
Yeah.
right? And we don't really bat an eye at that.
But no one tries to make the argument to Howard in the moment, like, hey, these are chicken eggs. Everyone just goes with his assumption.
They,
that they're duck
yeah,
eggs
they
and
just
they're
like accept that. Oh yeah, of course he doesn't want these. Like they
Right.
like
Which
and that's
you've already got the theme. Like they could have given him like duck soup. They could have like really hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Like it would have made sense.
They
Wait,
clearly know how to cook it. so.
positivity podcast. I'm not trying to rewrite this movie. It is they nailed it. Eggs, duck. They are. If they're on the nose about anything in this movie, it's their duck puns and duck references. It is quite literally nonstop. I mean, there's constant quips, constant duck references. It is. I appreciate the dedication. I mean, as a pun connoisseur myself, the rate at which they were firing them isn't easy to do.
Chris and his puns. That sound you hear, folks, is my soul leaving my body.
There one line in this scene really stuck out to me. The waitress is progressively getting frustrated with them because they order the special, then they send it back, and then Dr. Jennings is getting hostile. And at one point, when they're being so rude, she walks away, but she says, "Hostility is like psychic boomerang," and walks off. And I'm like, what is this little nugget of knowledge you're just throwing out there, random waitress? I Googled that line because, like, is this like a philosophy? Is this an old phrase? The only the only hits I got were about Howard the Duck and this waitress in this line. So, like, I guess the writers came up with it for this waitress. But, guys, let's break this down. Hostility is like psychic boomerang.
If she said hostility is like a karmic boomerang, that would make more sense to me. Because it means that eventually it's going to come back. Your own hostility will eventually come back and get you. I would have understood that. Saying it's a psychic boomerang makes it sound like me being hostile is going to give me an edge in the future. I don't know how, but it will. That's how I'm taking that, which is very confusing.
It's a Captain Boomerang kind of thing. It's a weapon to be used later on.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a psychic boomerang. Like she's acknowledging that you have the... Who is she saying this to? Is this Howard or Dr. Jennings at the time? I can't remember.
I think Dr. Jennings, but she kind of says it's like the whole table. She just like makes
It's like at that point, Jennings is getting crazy and Howard sent the food back, and I think she's kind of done with all of them.
It was definitely one that I thought needed follow-up or addressing in some way, but I'm glad that they didn't. I'm glad that they just left it on the table.
I need that on a shirt
and walk away.
Like I need that. Like I would get a poster of that.
I would stitch
like,
that on
live,
a pillow.
laugh, love. Hostility is a psychic boomerang, like right next to it. Same kind of thing.
Sounds like a
Same
Street
energy.
Fighter. Sounds like a Street Fighter move. Psychic boomerang.
Pokemon move, yeah.
So to get out of the situation where the people of this town are trying to barbecue Howard the Duck, Beverly sort of tricks Dr. Jennings into saving Howard. She keeps insisting that these people are insulting him and he should do something about it. So he starts going crazy on the diner and the people of the diner and just causing mayhem. There's like blenders turning on and he's shooting lightning and just a lot of cool stuff happening on set, like really over the top. And this movie, Howard doesn't exactly break the fourth wall. He's not as satirical as the character normally is, but he does get a few lines, especially in this scene, because like things are just going crazy and Howard's free. Like they're not trying to capture him anymore. And he says, "They get the point, Jennings." Like, calm down. I'm fine. And then at the end of the scene, he lifts Howard into the air with like his psychic abilities.
His psychic boomerang.
His psychic boomerang. And
His hostility came back.
She helped him to realize his true potential.
Unleash the Overlord. So he's holding Howard like up near the ceiling, and Beverly is like, "Howard, get down from there." And he says, "Like I'm doing this on purpose." I appreciated those kind of little, like I said, not quite breaking the fourth wall, but just fun little lines about that.
And there's a lot to Jennings in this scene that shows that like it's an incompetent villain that is not a villain. And it's written in a weird way where it's like the demon is slowly coming out, but in these weirdly like nice ways. Like she walks up and takes the eggs and he's like, "She took my eggs." And like, that's what and it reminds me a lot of almost like a Venom style anti-villain, but like in this weird, like endearing way. And it's written like that, where it's his anger is sent out into the world in this really weird and for really dumb reasons constantly.
And he's like having fun, clearly, like while he's doing it, like cackling when he blows up cop cars and stuff.
Yeah. And it's all like it's enjoyable to watch that descent in the way it's written.
I also like that despite the fact that the Dark Overlord is from this entire different like solar system, he's still able to make like restaurant puns while he's doing this. Like he's still like making like closing time and like jokes about all of like working in a restaurant. And I'm just like, man, the dedication to understanding our universe before you came here is just tremendous. Villains don't do it enough. So shout out to the Dark Overlord of the universe.
This is no time for puns, Dark Overlord. We received an email.
Did we?
About this movie. So we always tell you guys, if there is a comic book movie that you like that was poorly received upon release, we want to know about it. Send us that email, bestoftherestpod@gmail.com. Let us know your favorite performances, best scenes. When we cover the movie, we're going to read your thoughts on the episode. Like this email we got here from Shane from Louisiana. Here's what they have to say. Tim Robbins is the best character. Leah had just done Back to the Future, Red Dawn, and Space Camp, so of course she was hot stuff at the time. She stole a lot of scenes, but Tim Robbins had only been doing TV up until then and had a small part in Top Gun. Tim Robbins played a goober and did a great job. Goober, I love it. Tim was physically running around screaming a lot. I think he was in more distress than Leah half the time. It worked so well for him. He was crazy and wild and just all over the place in most of the scenes. It's hard to believe this is the same guy we will later see in Jacob's Ladder and Shawshank. Shane says, my favorite scene was the scene in the diner. We all emphatically agree.
4 for 4.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with Jennings walking in, holding Howard's hand. Jennings keeps talking about world domination, and they order eggs. Of course, Howard freaks out. A fight happens between the locals and Howard where they're gonna cook him, and Jennings is just watching. There's even a chef sharpening his knives. Jennings is slowly evolving into some evil-looking thing during the whole event and decides to wreck shop when Beverly mentions the code key. It's a fun scene with action and comedy and cheesy special effects. When Jennings stands up, all glowing, one guy says he must have ate the chili. Great scene. I did love that bit a lot. Overall, what works, the the use of live action Howard. It was 1986. CGI was used for some of the film, but Howard was a guy in a suit, and it was a great suit. Jennings' transformation was good stuff too. Almost every scene, his costume changed to show his human form getting worse and worse. Great details went into it, from wiping his forehead and the napkin smoking when he put it on the table, to when Jennings spit, it was acid. Lastly, to this day, I remember the sound and special effects from when the satellite array blew up. That's from the finale of the movie, and it is a pretty rad scene when there's a big explosion at the lab. It's clearly like a miniature exploding, and I love miniatures in movies, and it is a great one. I'm glad they mentioned that. Thank you, Shane from Louisiana. We appreciate the email. If there is a movie that you have in mind, send us that email. We will read it on the episode. Or just jump into our Discord if you haven't already. There's a link in the episode description. You can drop your thoughts there for future episodes. We will let you know what those future episodes are, so you can watch movies in advance and send us your thoughts. We hope to see you there. And don't forget about that viewing of The Punisher we have coming up on December 11th. So guys, let's look a little bit at Shane's email here. So that line is hilarious. I can't believe I forgot to bring that up about the guy that said he must have ate the chili, because he's literally like, he has like a glow around him, like a ring of like blue light. And the way that citizens react in this movie, like to Howard or to these special effects, ranges from like screaming in horror and running away to assuming Howard is a kid in a suit, to just kind of like laughing. Like they accept that he's a 4-foot tall duck, but he's just dumb because he's a duck. It's so bizarre.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And that's, I think, like, if there's a strength of the movie, it's just that it really does run with all of that. Like it's interesting to watch people, like when Howard's trying to get a job, and like the woman that's trying to get him a job thinks that he's like in a suit trying to not get a job.
Just like some crazy weirdo.
Like just some crazy dude in a duck costume trying to do that so he won't get a job. Just like they go really hard on a lot of that. And it definitely adds to it and makes it feel like there's, we're thinking about this.
Cleveland must be a really weird place for how many people that, again, like you were saying, just kind of accept it. And some people don't. And it all depends kind of on the location, in probably a really good way that I didn't think of until this very moment. But yeah, that woman that is in the woman that's in the employment office, she talks like she's seen it all, right? So she's seen all these people that are come through and they'll do anything to stay out of a job while still getting a check. And you're not going to allow that. I'm not going to allow that to happen here. And so she's not surprised by it. But the woman right outside of City Hall, or the not City Hall, but the laboratories, screams and freaks out and runs away, because that's got to be pretty odd from where she's at. And the people outside in the diner at first kind of give a side glance, but still just allow it to happen. They're just like, this is kind of weird, but we're going to go with it. And then still, it takes a lot of convincing for them to really freak out and really start screaming and going nuts. It takes a good long while until they start acting like that.
There's even that scene where the kids think he's like a novelty. They're not fazed by him at all. They're more fazed by the fact that he's kind of a jerk to them. So yeah, what kind of stuff is happening in Cleveland? Like what's going on there?
It's like that bit in Ninja Turtles where they're in New York City and they just take it in stride. Looks like some kind of giant turtle in a trench coat.
You're going to LaGuardia, right?
But Andrew, you mentioned Howard is looking for a job, which is so the line of thinking, because he talks with Beverly. Their goal is to get him back to his home planet. They meet up with Phil, and right away it's clear that Phil does not have the means to get him home. And he's just like, forget you guys, I'm fine on my own. They kind of have a falling out early in the movie. And we hear his thought process. He's like, I've got to think about practical matters. Food, shelter, a job. And like, really? Like, you're on an alien planet and that's your thought? Like, imagine Charleston Heston landing on Planet of the Apes and being like, I got to make some money. I got to be a productive member of
I got to
society
find a
here.
job.
Yeah, it's so strange.
It's a very, very odd line of thinking, yeah.
Clearly, Duck World is just as much of a capitalist society as America is, and he's been trained that that is the only way of life. It's what you do.
Yeah, I actually like that they opened up with Duck World, showing that it was very much the same, and mainly the commercials right at the beginning
Yes.
felt a lot like the Rick and Morty sort of the flicking through the commercials or
Yeah.
the television episodes that they've got. Obviously, this predates it by a long shot, but it sort of gives you a snippet into the, I guess, what would have been the parody or the satirization of our world had it all taken place within the Duck World. I feel like it would have been a stronger sort of satirization, but it works so well to very clearly show, like what you're saying, that it's just like ours. It's a parallel.
My favorite one was it's like a commercial for like an appliance store, and the duck is like going crazy, like we're slashing prices, and he's hitting stuff with like a baseball bat, like this manic energy. It's like, yeah, it's the exactly kind of like cheesy local commercial that we would have here, and you like relate to it instantly. And each of these little segments, you see like 4 seconds of, but you get it right away. You get the tone.
It all hits. Yeah, you know exactly what they're going for, because it was all it's almost too real, really. Like you ads like that were so common, especially on like late night local access. Your guy with the local appliance store is out there like beating up appliances, like we're crushing prices. We're, you know, it's interesting. Like I like that they had the Indiana Jones Easter egg there that apparently on Duck World they did Indiana Jones just starring a duck instead and stuff like that. And yeah, it's
excuse
definitely...
me, it's not Indiana Jones.
I'm sorry.
I believe you're talking about Breeders' Lost Stork. That's the pun they came up with for Indiana Jones.
My mistake.
Yeah.
Breeders. How could you forget Breeders? I could not write down all the puns. There was the poster for Breeders, that was Indiana Jones. There was another movie poster, and the actors' names were Mae Best and W.C. Fowles. There was Rolling Egg magazine, which it's like the equivalent to that would be Rolling Baby magazine, Rolling Fetus magazine. Like, not everything has to reference your species. Instead of Flash Dance, it was Splash Dance.
Obviously, instead of some of the more adult references, definitely took their own.
You're talking about
liberties.
Play Duck magazine, a play on.
Yes, I am.
Play Human magazine that we have here.
Yeah.
So this is like the first literally 5 minutes of the movie.
This is literally like the first 5 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
In the first 5 minutes of this movie, we see like overt references to like adult material and legitimately a topless duck. Like,
so,
it's ridiculous.
The duck has
does not. It just doesn't. That's not right.
So I get that they've evolved. They make it a point to be like, ducks evolved the way we did. They lost the need for wings. They grew arms. Okay. Breasts are a mammal thing.
Yeah.
So they've apparently changed species. Female ducks have breasts like you would see on a human, covered in feathers and nipples. I'm trying to take my time how to word this. I'm trying to be like anatomy correct. Like there's no way around it.
There's no nice way to put this. There's no, and like you see, like literally like back to back. Like he opens the magazine, and then like he immediately crashes through some woman's bathroom while he's getting sucked to our planet. And like the back to back, I was like, "There's no way this movie just did that, right?"
There's
like,
two sets of.
Somebody created two sets.
Or maybe it's the same duck. Maybe they live in the same apartment. Maybe he lives next to the
possible.
Playmate.
Did they argue that to the MPAA? And they were like, well, it's ducks. So
what is this rated?
It's 13 plus, I think.
What is the reason? Is partial nudity is that nudity?
I don't know if it would be, because that's an excellent question.
And guys, it is rated PG.
Oh, that's what I thought. That's why I was
early PG before we had 13.
Yeah,
right?
is this before like Gremlins?
This is 86, so it's probably right at the cusp of that. I think this might be the same year as Poltergeist, where that really was kind of like, this is PG, guys?
All right, guys, I have what parents need to know. You ready? Parents need to know that though this PG film derives from a Marvel comic superhero spoof, it's in sort of a no ducks land of an audience demographic, with the animal costumed main character and childish sci-fi and rock and roll attitude mixed with satire, violence, and PG-13 raunch, better appreciated by grown-ups. Howard smokes and drinks and reads the duck equivalent of pornography. We have clues that he's sexually active with a number of lady ducks and nearly has a sex scene with a scantily dressed human heroine. There is light swearing, and police as dumb goons prevail among the stereotypes. Younger kids might be disturbed by the villain's monster mutations. Huh. I could. There's comments from parents. We could be here all day reading through these. But
We absolutely could.
This is a rabbit hole, but they don't mention
it goes to
the
some
nipples.
strange places. They don't. They leave that alone, but bring up the hints that Howard is sexually active.
Yeah. That's my second favorite. Well, okay. There are three main, like, real back-to-back duck things, where it's the commercials in Duck World, then his wallet, which has, like, Marshington is their Washington. It's got George Marshington with the bill, looking like a duck. And then, of course, later he is walking by and he sees that, like, duck season is open.
And also in his wallet, he doesn't have MasterCard. He has Mallard card and a credit card to Blooming Ducks instead of Bloomingdale's. And
so,
one other thing in his wallet. The last
thing, that she pulls out, showing that he's sexually active.
Because
if it's one thing this movie needed to explicitly outline to us, it's that.
It's an unwrapped condom. We should note that it's a loose condom.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And I think that so one of the notes that I had was later on, and the aforementioned almost has a scene with a human woman.
Yeah.
Which I think is played up to intentionally be, obviously they're like caught in that moment, and the scientists think that they are about to do it, but she is.
It's like an Austin Powers gag where you see their silhouettes.
Yeah, right. And it's supposed to be setting up that gag more so than actually any sort of intimacy, I think. Up until that point, Howard has been a skis ball this entire time, and this very, like, sure of himself skis ball that is kind of grating for the first, that's probably the first 45 minutes of the movie, 40 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
And then in that moment, that whole character breaks, and then we lose what was this skeezy, overconfident Howard, and we get the more vulnerable, like, the Howard that we can maybe more relate to and like throughout the rest of the movie. And
as soon as she starts coming onto him, he's like, no, wait, I was just messing around. Like, you don't actually want to do this. Like, it was all like an act.
Yeah, and I think having a loose condom in your wallet shows how pretty unsure he was about this entire process.
Right.
And so it's sort of a hint going into it. But I had in my notes that I know that Howard's skeezy and it's intentional. Are they going to retcon that later? Do they change that? And then immediately after, he has that backpedaling as she starts to come onto him and sort of mess with him. And so that was something that, like, I thought that they did really well in terms of being able to take that character that really comes off unlikable at the beginning, and by the end of the movie, we do have a more grounded. More
as grounded as a space duck can be.
Yeah.
Guys, look, we've established that science is not my strong suit. I'm not exactly sure how the dark side of the moon works. Do ducks have sex? Do they have penetration? Is the egg fertilized inside the duck? It's not laid and then fertilized?
No, yes. Yeah, it is.
It's inside. Fertilized. So, okay.
But do you know how it's shaped?
Guys, I don't really want us to go here. This is a family show. We've gone way too far already.
Yeah, we're gonna have to come back and cut some.
I was just my last comment is I'm just shocked it wasn't actually in a wrapper, because it could have been a chance for yet another
pun,
duck pun. Like,
what would be their Trojan?
Trojan.
Well,
probably Trojan duck instead of Trojan man. Or show like a Trojan horse that's a duck, because they'll do anything to throw a duck in.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, I guess it was like they thought that maybe we wouldn't recognize like it just from the wrapper. Like, so they're like, we need to make sure we show it so they know what it is. It's like a strange line of thinking.
So don't some birds just have like a cochlea, whatever you call it, like just a hole instead of like genitals.
Chris, stop
I'm
going
not- I'm
back
not-
to this.
Possums have a forked penis to prevent interspecies mating. I know that. Anyway,
Corkscrews or ducks are corkscrewed, by the way.
oh,
That
so
was
are
the thing that-
so are pigs.
Oh,
Look at
like
that.
their tails? It's just
It's
same-
yep,
underneath?
yeah, it's
Wow.
yep.
We're all learning things today, folks.
the movie's educational, if nothing else.
Mhm, mhm.
That's certainly a word.
there's a lot of duck puns. We've established that, and I like that the movie
Yes.
kind of acknowledges it at one point because the cops are talking after the lab explosion and they got to hunt him down, and the chief is like, "How am I going to explain a manhunt for a duck?" And one of the cops says, "It's a duck hunt," and the captain's like, "Don't start, please, don't start." Like,
This is not the time for puns.
Yeah. But the duck puns, they don't even stop on Duck World. One of the commercials that he sees here on Earth is a commercial for Duckaroni instead of Rice-A-Roni. And it's like got the box made up and everything.
Yeah.
I Googled this, not a real product, but
Oh, okay.
in this world, Duckaroni.
In that moment, I accepted it fully. I was
I-
like, yeah, Duckaroni's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been surprised either way.
never
when I
questioned
Googled
it. In fact, I'm a little let down that it's not real. I think, you could look at the state of the world and think that if Duckaroni was a thing, maybe we'd be in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see how you got there. Whenever Tim Robbins first meets Howard, and he's doing like tests on him and checking him out. He knows he's an alien, so he immediately jumps to like special powers. Like, can you bend this lead pipe? Do you have laser eyes? And he says, "It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's a duck." Clearly referencing Superman. So in this world, we can surmise that DC Comics exists and Marvel Comics do not. Because they would know Howard the Duck.
That's not the first time that's happened, though. Doesn't Aunt May say that Peter's not Superman in one of the Spider-Man movies?
Yeah. And
Like,
Venom references kryptonite, so Superman is
Even the
everywhere.
comics represent kryptonite sometimes. Is just like, so like apparently within the Marvel universe, DC Comics just exists.
Also, why wouldn't he have said, it's a bird, it's a plane, no, it's a super duck?
Because he already said bird. It's not a bird, it's a duck.
Well, and like the whole
Well, he
point of that
says-
statement, is that Superman is not a bird or a plane. In this case, he very much is a bird. So it's like you kind of don't need to go any further. Like,
It's a
He
bird.
should It's a bird, specifically a duck. That's what he should have said.
exactly.
All right, let's dig in a little bit more about the characterization of Howard. He's an everyman. He's got the same basic wants and needs as any other young to middle-aged dude. Is kind of what
I mean, he's
they're going for.
27. He's supposed to be 27 in this movie.
Which is,
and that,
I did not catch on to that at all.
Yeah, I would have guessed like mid-30s to 40. Like, because he shows him like coming home to his apartment, like he just got off of a shift that he hates. Is kind of the impression that I got, but
right.
I don't know how to age a duck. Whatever, sure, 27.
I was proud of him to find out that he was a marketing copywriter. That's an impressive job now, and he would have done pretty well for himself.
I don't know if this is stereotypical of me, but as we're walking through Howard's apartment and we're seeing all the movie posters and all the posters, I'm like, every single duck on these posters looks like Howard. So I have no idea if like Howard is a music star. I have no idea if he's a movie star.
I was like,
I have no idea what his life is because every like the Breeders poster, I'm like, is that not Howard? Like, is he not? Is that not just him? Like, I don't understand what's
Is he
happening.
like a washed up actor? I thought they were going to do something like that.
Yeah, a
Like,
washed up
there's-
musician maybe because like he
Yeah.
has the band thing on his wall. I was like, what are you?
Well, and later on, after he meets Leah Thompson's Bev, they talk about their music careers, and he says like he used to make music, but then it all fell apart, and he had to get a regular job. And I thought that was going to really go into sort of more of a looking back at his old music career and sort of building on this old fame, because my head immediately went back to those posters. And I was
Right.
thinking, oh, okay, those were posters from whenever he was more famous. And then he lost his fame and we were getting, but it was a little bit more grounded, which I liked, in the sense of he was just like, I tried doing music. Everyone told me I couldn't do it. So I quit. and now I have a more regular job. Like it wasn't.
Well, then he like went to med school. Like he says he went to med school,
Oh,
and then he
yeah.
dropped out of that, and then now he's a copyright. He just writes copyright stuff, and it's like it's very like it's it's not where you're expecting that to go. You're at the very least expecting that this duck from another planet has had this, I guess, ridiculous life, but it's really just Howard being like, I'm just your average person. I just happen to be a duck. And there's something in that. There's something about taking it and being like, yeah, he's from another planet and yeah, he's an alien, but like, he's just kind of a dude.
The only thing special about him is duck foo.
Yeah. Kind of going back to
Quack foo.
Right. There are so many puns in this. At one point, Beverly is like sneaking him through the city, has like a trash bag over his head, and he's like, I'm gonna have to see a psychiatrist for the rest of my life. I was like, you mean a quack? Like, that was an opportunity. Because if there's anything this movie needed was one more
Another
pun.
duck pun. That was the time for puns.
At the well, at least at the end of this movie, he ends up on stage with Beverly and her band, playing guitar, following his passion again here on Earth that he lost all hope for back on Duck World. So I think it's a nice arc for the character.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just a note, all of the songs by Beverly's band in this movie are written and produced by Thomas Dolby, who is famous for the song She Blinded Me with Science, amongst other things, but is also just a legendary music producer. And I gotta say, he came up with a few bops here. Some of these songs, some of this stuff kicks just a little bit. So props to Thomas Dolby for that.
I think a lot of Leah Thompson's songs are. I wasn't a big fan of the last one, but all of the other ones were great.
That's like, the one song that's not on par with all the others is the title song.
Yeah.
Turns out when you try to write a song called Howard the Duck, it just doesn't translate well.
They're all like just over and over again. The music in this movie was great.
Yeah, I agree.
The plane scene that we've talked about, which is apparently called an ultralight aircraft, according to what I read up about this, but it's like the plane in Radio Flyer. It's like a bicycle with a hang glider attached to the back of it. I don't know how to describe it, but Howard is flying most of the time, and Tim Robbins, still handcuffed, is like his passenger. And this goes on for a long time. It feels like a 20-minute chase sequence. It's so long. It cuts away to Bev and her storyline, it cuts back to it, and it's still going. But they do some pretty rad stunts. He flies low, like over a lake, and Tim Robbins is like hanging off the airplane, and his head is like going underwater. And there's some wide shots where it's obviously a stunt double, but they actually had an airplane, actually flew it, actually had a stuntman do it. Like, there's some legit Hollywood magic going on with this stuff.
Apparently, there were scenes where Tim Robbins and Ed Gale had to like fly the plane, like legit had to like do it, and it's insane to me. It's another thing that's ridiculous to think of Tim Robbins doing, like flying on an ultralight plane with a guy dressed as a duck. Like, you're in Shawshank. What are you doing?
At one point, they're flying low over like a boat over that lake, and we get a guy diving off the boat, and we hear a Wilhelm scream.
We do.
Is it Wilhelm?
I don't know how to say it. I've always said Wilhelm. My brother actually messaged me the other day and was like, why does he say that so weird?
It's a Wilhelm scream. What are you talking about? That's what it's called, right? Wilhelm
scream. No, but yeah, obviously those are a favorite of George Lucas. I think they've appeared in like all the Indiana Jones movies, all the Star Wars movies. So I'm not shocked at all that managed to show up here, but always gets a chuckle out of me.
It was very abrupt, and sometimes they're a little hidden. But it did make me. I was waiting for it the whole movie, and it was a satisfying Wilhelm scream. I was. Yeah.
They used it at the right time. Mm-hmm.
They used their shot. They planned their shot and they executed it well.
So Dr. Jennings transforming, he gets more and more gnarly, and like I said, at one point, like in the truck, his tongue comes out and it's like a big claw. And at one point, it's not even an actor there; it's clearly like a puppet with a big claw coming out of his mouth, and it's just a super cool, super 80s effect, like something out of The Thing. And I'm a sucker for that stuff. I think it looks awesome. My favorite form of like his final form is pretty cool. We'll get to it. It's like a big stop motion puppet. But my favorite form of his is like just before that, and like his spine like his vertebrae of his spine start
Yeah.
poking through his lab coat, and he's just, you don't even see like a person anymore. It's just like a monstrous. He starts to look almost like the Abomination from the Incredible Hulk, and I think it's just a super cool look.
Yeah, just like we were saying earlier, like any of those body horror moments, they really went all in for, and like that tongue, that tentacle tongue that comes out, it extends further and further as he progresses in his stages, and it does become this like very menacing, sickly looking thing that, it rivals anything from Poltergeist or The Thing, in my opinion. Like, it works really well.
Yeah, they go hard on it. They go all in. It's not, that's not, definitely not something in this movie that looks, I don't want to say low rent, but like it doesn't look like they skimped on it. The effort was put in.
Now, Andrew, I know you had seen this movie before. It had been a minute, but you had seen it before.
Yes.
I had never seen it before. I just kind of knew of its reputation, mostly just that it's weird. Preston, this was your first time watching it, so let me ask you, did you expect, by the time you're at this finale and he's fighting a monster from outer space that's a dark overlord and blowing up a lab, did you expect the movie to get here? Is this what you expected going in? I did not. We'll say.
No, yeah. I can't say I did. But I also had no idea what to expect. All I knew about this movie was its reputation, the main character, and the trailer. And the trailer sold a completely different movie, in my opinion. And what we got was a lot more wacky and zany and silly and campy and all those things. But even like we were saying earlier, that first 50 minutes to an hour of this movie, I never would have expected that this is where we would end up either. Even though we knew sort of the stakes of the technology that was supposed to send him home and that they were going to use that and it was going to be involved. This is not at all where I was thinking it would end up.
I didn't think Howard would be like a hero, which I think, I don't know if he's a superhero. We can have that debate if you want, but I didn't think he would literally be like saving the world. I thought it'd be like the comedy of a duck that's like a dude and hanging out with the lady and functioning in society and, you know, all the hilarious comedy you can pull from that. That's what I expected. I didn't expect him to be like fighting an evil being.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I like, you know, when the monster appears, the final form of the monster. I remember even I remembered that. And like even watching it the first time, I was just like, that's a hell of a thing. I was like, that's certainly like that's not how I like, you know, you think like weird morphed Jennings is about all it's gonna go. You think like you think that's the final form, and then like, no, we got one more trick up our sleeve. And I was like, whoa. Because like Howard has fought like gingerbread men that have come to life. Like he fights weird, wacky stuff. He doesn't deal with like intergalactic space aliens like this typically. But it's definitely an odd movie. It's almost like it's two movies. There's like moment that it kind of like turns. Because like the first half of the movie really is kind of like the trailer, where like we're just seeing Howard's kind of misadventures being a duck on this planet. But then like there's this hard turn where like suddenly the more sinister machinations become clear, and it turns into kind of your more standard hero story. But it's it's a weird movie. That's really the only way to put it. It's like this is a Superman 3 experience.
Yeah, no matter if you love this movie, hate this movie, watching it as an adult, as a kid, every single person who has ever watched this movie at some point stopped and went, what the fuck am I watching? Every single person. And it might happen at different points for different people, right. But at the very least, by the time you get to like the implied sex scene in the bed where Leah Thompson is rubbing her fingers on his chest and his feathers on his head stand up to insinuate things, and she is in her skimpy underwear. By the time you get there, if it's not happening for you then, maybe you don't ever say that. But I think everyone had that reaction like at some point. And kind of like we said at the top of the episode, Andrew, like the reputation of this movie isn't necessarily that it's bad. It's just that it's weird and weird that exists. And having seen it, I think I agree. I would not call this being bad is not the first thing that comes to mind when I think about this movie. No. I just think it's weird. It's strange that this is the first Marvel Comics movie. That's so bizarre. It's weird that they chose to go this route. It's weird the things they decided to do, the tone they went for. It's so weird. but honestly, I'm kind of glad it exists.
Yeah, obviously, I think the George Lucas of it all plays a big factor in this getting made, but just the fact that, like, nobody else with any kind of influence, say, was able to get anything else off the ground before this in a theatrical sense. Like, obviously, we'd had television shows and stuff by that point, but, like, the fact that this is essentially the first live-action Marvel film in, like, the modern sense of the term. Obviously, you can look back to the serials of the 40s and 50s, but that was even before television, and they barely count. But it's so strange. This is one of those movies that definitely is like, it's so weird that it exists. Like, it's like, you know, Judge Dredd starring Sylvester Stallone in 1995. It's just like, it's such a weird combination of factors that the fact that it exists at all becomes this like weird almost achievement in itself. Like the fact that there was a Howard the Duck movie made that George Lucas was an executive producer on, or Howard is live action in 1986. Like, that's so strange.
Tim
like,
Robbins is the side.
Tim Robbins is in it. Like Leah Thompson is coming off Back to the Future, and she's like, I'm going to do Howard the Duck. Like, it's just such a weird thing. But like you said, you're almost glad that it exists, because, like, and I'm not saying this to be, like, detrimental, but, like, I can't imagine somebody saying, this is how a Howard the Duck movie should be today, if they were going to make one. Like, they would, you know, they'd be like, oh, we're going to use the original Steve Gerber run. We're just going to adapt some stories out of that, or we're going to look at the later Bill Mantlo run. But, like, this is such a weird thing, and so many choices went into it, that it's just almost, it's an interesting achievement to just kind of marvel at, that this is a thing that exists in 4K, no less.
In glorious 4K. I mentioned earlier that Leah Thompson is kind of still like fond of the character. She pitched to Kevin Feige a MCU Howard the Duck movie that she intended to direct. The premise being, as far as we know, that after the events of Endgame, Howard the Duck is left stranded on Earth. Pretty similar to the movie we have here. So she has like an idea in mind for a modern MCU. They have announced that they did pass on that, but with things like What If, I mean, I'm sure we're going to get some Howard stories before too long in the MCU.
I think, especially, like, I mean, just do it as an animated show. Who's going to get hurt? Nobody. In fact, we may all be better for it. Like I said, Duckaroni is single-handedly responsible for our current existence. Let's not continue the cycle. Set us free, Feige. You know how to do it. Leah Thompson is ready to go. Don't keep it from us.
I was thinking of a couple things throughout. Was like the lightning that comes out of him is straight out of the Star Wars Episode 3. I believe it's Episode 3 off the top of my head.
Force lightning, the Emperor's lightning.
Force lightning. I mean, and these are all ILM, right? It's the same companies that are creating a lot of these effects.
I imagine it has to be, yeah.
And so there's just moments throughout that it's just like, hey, this is straight out of other George Lucas movies. That I don't know. I just found it really interesting that these other movies that have this probably a way bigger budget and way more behind them and stuff, this still did get effects and makeup and that body horror stuff that was rivaling a lot of the stuff at the time.
I mean, how 80s is this movie? Take away the fact that it's like a Marvel adaptation and it's got these sexual innuendos. Take all that out. And you just have a story of an alien that lands on Earth and befriends a rock star that kind of looks like Madonna or Cyndi Lauper, and they go on this adventure and cops are chasing them, and there's a big monster at the end that kind of looks like something out of Ghostbusters. Like, it's
either goth punk,
it's a Ghostbusters ending.
It is, but it's not that different from movies of the time. It's just, you know, like 5 Degrees weird enough that it has the reputation that it does.
The one thing I did read about for this that I thought was interesting was this was one of the first instances where they apparently used, like, when Howard is getting propelled out of his apartment, the chair is being held up by wires and being, like, flown through the whole thing, and they just later digitally erased the wires. This was apparently one of the first times they'd ever done that in a film.
I saw that too, yeah, and that's like such a common thing in VFX.
Like, it is now, and then, like, to think that this is where, you know, the Force lightning comes from Howard the Duck. Howard the Duck, again, is the nexus through which future things are birthed. It is so strange.
It launched the careers of 10,000 actors. Andrew,
Is Tim Robbins 9,999 of those?
yes, his gravitas is that strong.
Yeah.
Andrew, I am not super familiar with Howard the Duck in print. I can't say I've read a ton. I think I literally have one issue of Howard the Duck just because I thought it was a funny cover. I, of course, know like his cameos in the MCU movies, but
Right.
tell me, in your summation, how does this movie function as an adaptation of the character Howard the Duck?
There's definitely pieces of things here. Like, obviously, Beverly is from the comics. She is different in this movie. She is a musician in this movie. In the comics, she is more of like a nude model type thing. They obviously have a companionship in the comics that translates over, but it really is just like their weird adventures. So I guess in that way, it does track, but then it kind of doesn't. Like Howard getting zapped off his planet by an unknown force and onto Earth, that's what happens to Howard. That's how he gets here. It's like a Martian Manhunter type situation where he's just beamed to Earth and it's like, whoop, I don't know how to get back. So Howard just kind of runs with it. He debuts in comics with like Man-Thing. So he runs with like some of the horror characters for a little while, but then like he's running into all these ridiculous characters like Pro Rata, who's this cosmic accountant, and Turnip Man and Kidney Lady, and these ridiculous, over-the-top, insane characters. And that's
when
not
did they
really
get
what
their
we get
movies?
here.
That sounds awesome.
Exactly. Like, I want the Cosmic Accountant. That's the movie that I personally want. But, like, you know, there's not a lot of that zaniness here. You're getting a kind of more prototypical evil villain at the end of the day, whereas Howard is typically more like I said, he fights like animated gingerbread men. Like it's that's the kind of stuff that Howard normally gets involved in, or at least he does in the original run.
So you're saying
by
this
Steve
movie
Gerber.
is toned down from the comics?
Yeah, actually, essentially, yes. Like if this movie were more in line with the comics, he'd be fighting a lot, or not even fighting. He'd be doing a lot weirder. Howard becomes a wrestler briefly. Like he does. Like Howard runs with everything. There's literally nothing that's off limits. So it definitely keeps the fish out of water aspect by putting Howard into a place that he's not familiar with. We get that relationship with Beverly. Her backstory's changed a little bit. Obviously, it's the 80s. Everybody's a musician. Makes you way cooler. But yeah, the villain of this piece, that, to be fair, like, we don't find out about that villain until, like, the 50-minute mark. Like, we go a long time in this movie before finding out that there really is a villain at all.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really get to that. And that's when it kind of takes, like, a turn for a more, like, standard, there's an evil alien coming to get us, which I'm sure Howard has done something like, but Howard is more like, there's almost an existentialism to Howard, where like the difference between something being, the difference between witnessing something great and something stupid can all be a matter of like perspective. And that's kind of really the stuff that Howard is diving into, is this weird sense of like, it's a commentary on just like humanity, but then like you get these strange, ridiculous villains who again are just meant to accentuate these strange realities of life. And yeah, the movie, if anything, is actually kind of toned down. Now, again, I don't know how you can necessarily do, I mean, if you're going to do a giant stop motion alien, I'm sure you could have done a giant stop motion gingerbread man. That wouldn't have been difficult.
You
But
really want those gingerbread men.
I really do, because to me, that makes it a Christmas movie. So then it would become the greatest Christmas movie of all time. So, but yeah, so like as an adaptation, we're taking the bones, not the eggs, just the bones, and just kind of mashing it all up into this more kind of, I guess you could call it, palatable experience. Like we've got Howard, he's the fish out of water, he's got Beverly, but then we kind of go for a more classic villain structure that just makes it a little bit, I think, like you said, it's not too removed from 80s movies of the time.
Yeah, kind of put through the prism of an 80s family action movie, kind of, you could say. So it's a weird end result.
But it could have been weirder. That's, I guess, the reality is it could be weirder.
Maybe someday.
And just talking about those gingerbread men again. The idea is like we had the Stay Puft. We've had similar sort of end villains that you could have introduced that would have been in line with other things that we had seen before.
Right. Another Ghostbusters ending.
Yeah.
A second Ghostbusters ending in the same movie.
I I think that does it for Howard the Duck Talk. I mean, I think we covered all the high points here, and you might be thinking we spent more time talking about how weird this movie is rather than diving into the positives, but to me, the weirdness is this movie's best strength. Watching this and just being like, I can't believe this exists. I can't believe they made this in 1986. I can't believe this is the Marvel comic they adapted into a movie. It is bizarre. Like I said, I genuinely mean it when I say I'm glad this movie exists. I am glad that I've seen it. And it's genuinely something that you've got to see for yourself. I would recommend seeing it just so you can experience how strange it is. There's nothing else like it.
Yes, I was smiling ear to ear for pretty much 90% of the movie, and even those moments where I would kind of like roll my eyes at some of the ideas, I would still laugh at what they were doing and how they were pulling it off. And I wonder if it would almost be, if it were polished up, if it would be more well received today, put out in this sort of just wacky and strange sort of sense of humor that has come back around.
Yeah, it's a movie that like I said, I don't mean to say this really derogatory, but like I couldn't imagine a movie like this being made today. Not just because anything in the movie is offensive, not because I think you couldn't make it, but like I just don't think anybody would be like, this is the approach we should take.
Yeah. Take the risk
and,
of funding a movie like this, and
like
hoping it's a
$38
success.
million is not nothing. Like that's a significant investment, and it's a little bit of a bummer that it wasn't successful and we didn't get the sequel with Howard's arch nemesis Dr. Bong. But they took the risk, and I respect them for that immensely.
Preston, thank you so much for being here. This was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed you coming on, watching this movie for us. It means a lot, and thanks for breaking it down, man. It was a good time.
Thank you all for having me. And again, I'm really glad to be on this episode and on the show, but I was happy to watch Howard the Duck after I watched it. I was
Good.
trepidatious going into it, and then afterwards I'm glad that I was able to see it, and I'm glad I had a reason to.
People that are hearing your voice right now, and they're like, man, that is a great sounding voice. I want more of this man's voice in my ears. How can they do that? Where can they find you, Preston?
Currently, I am the co-host with Greg Griffith on Level Zero. Greg has created this great show that goes over the history of games and sort of the concepts of gaming in a way that is approachable for people that are both veterans. You may still learn something about your favorite medium, as well as for people that are newer to gaming. And it works really well in this sort of short form. It's typically under an hour. You're going to learn something about gaming. You're going to learn something about franchises like Nintendo, Sony, or Sega. And I've been on a couple episodes with him. I've done the E3 episode, and I've also done some YouTube and Twitch stuff. For Level Zero, I've got In Detail, where I interview indie developers about their games. I was able to talk to Adam Saltzman with Finji. I've talked to most recently the developers of Crawl Yard, and they were a ton of fun. That's been a really good one.
Yeah, I hope nobody listening to this that's into games is sleeping on Level Zero. It's such a good podcast. That first season, or it's mostly Greg starting out, but those, like you said, snippet, bite-sized episodes, and I've played games my whole life. I feel like I know a lot about them, but still, they're very scripted, very funny, very well thought out, well acted at times, very entertaining. And like I said, I still learned a thing or two along the way. But like listening to Greg like have a phone conversation with a Mario soundboard is extremely entertaining. And I know you guys just started season 2 with a deep dive into history of Sega, which is super fascinating. I love the video version of the roundtable you guys did with everybody's favorite Sega video game. So please don't sleep on that podcast, guys. Go check it out. Now, you're a busy man. You have another podcast, yeah?
Yes, so it is on the Draft Punks feed. It is not directly Draft Punks. It is called Trivia Punks. But if you go to the Draft Punks feed, we have 3 episodes out. It is a trivia show where we build a trivia game around the interests of our guest. And so we've had on Bob Buell. We've had on Wes Bates from Great Game Debate. We've had on, most recently, Odell Harmon Jr., who has been all over the games industry in terms of his writing. And we just sort of break down their interests into 5 different categories. If they win 3 out of the 5 categories, then they win a prize. We usually have music categories. We've got movie categories. a little bit of everything. I think one of the most exciting things in this most recent one, in my opinion, was we talked about dyslexia, and we talked about famous people with dyslexia as one of the categories, using quotes and descriptions. And it's something that like we don't want to just do movies and TV and games. We want to be able to go into the actual lives and interests of people that we're interviewing, whether it's, widely known or not.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's a super cool concept. You can check the episode description for links to the shows that Preston is talking about. Please go subscribe, go check them out, give them a listen. And again, Preston, thank you so much. This was a blast.
Thank y'all. And to anyone listening, make sure that you're also, I don't know why they wouldn't be following the show if they're already listening.
They better be. If this is your first episode, I hope you're hooked. Go download our backlog. Go jump into our Discord. Preston is there. If you think he did a great job as a guest here, hop into our Discord and let him know. And I'll probably say something nice to you. Preston, if you leave a comment in our Discord, Preston will respond to the funniest joke you've ever heard. That's a guarantee from me.
So I was telling Sonic the other day, that's no man, that's an egg.
It will be so much better than that joke right there. It'll be I promise.
He must
It'll
have
be
eaten a chili.
All right, let's get out of here. Boy, what a movie, Andrew. I think it's safe to say the horniest movie we've covered on the show.
Yeah, I think that's the tactful way of putting it. You could certainly be a lot more explicit if you wanted, but yes, this is definitely it's rated PG, and that's so confusing.
So weird. This, the concept of our show, we tell people about it, and listeners write in, and this is definitely one that kind of came up a lot. I've had like family and friends like, "Oh, you guys are gonna cover Howard the Duck, right? That may be so weird." My brother in particular, my older brother, from like day one, he's like, "Oh, you guys have to do Howard the Duck." I think it's something that he saw. Like, I never saw this movie. I think he saw it as a kid. Like I say, he's a little bit older than me. And I was like, "Well, dude, you should rewatch it. You should write in, send us your thoughts. We're probably gonna need help on it." And so finally, he got around to watching it a couple weeks ago, and he messaged me, and he's like, "You're on your own. Like, I don't know what to say." he's like, Leah Thompson. I'm kind of editing what he said. Like, she's really attractive. Like, that was the high point for me. I was like, "All right, well, that's fair enough."
Yeah,
throw that to the Positivity Podcast. That works.
No, it's a. Like I said, I know I've watched this before, and it was probably back in the days where you were like, all right, I'm just gonna find a copy of this somewhere and watch it. Because I remember the days where like you wanted Transformers the movie, you had to go digging for an out of print DVD because they weren't making them anymore, stuff like that. I know this was definitely at one point kind of like that, where like if you wanted Howard the Duck, you were ending up in the Black Forests of Germany talking to some guy that only speaks Norwegian trying to get a copy of this. But it was so strange to revisit it now, especially. And it's always weird to go back to these things, especially in the modern lens with just like all the things we have with superheroes now, to just look back at this. And like you said, the first theatrical Marvel film. And it's so weird that like in all the years, nobody else ever really saw anything worth doing until this. And that's not to say that, there was television. I don't want to discount, the Incredible Hulk, things like that on television. But like, just so strange that this was the one where they were like, this is the movie. Yeah. This is the one. And it's an experience. Like, and I'm not even saying that in like, it's not like, we often joke that, like, this is a movie. And that's just like a coded way of being like, this is really bad, but I just don't want to say it. Like, but like when I say that this movie is an experience and it's strange and it's weird, that's not really meant to be like, don't watch this. It's more so meant almost to encourage watching it, because you kind of need to see it to like really understand just how weird this is. Like, even more to me than something like Superman 3. Because Superman 3, at the end of the day, at least you can be like, this is a Superman movie. It can always get kind of wild. That's never off the table when it comes to Superman. But for Howard the Duck, that's such a weird thing. And this movie, like I said, it could have been even weirder. We could have had Howard going to save Santa from aligning with Hydra. Could have been a story they did here, but it wasn't. But even as it is, it's still so weird. And it's something you have to experience.
Have to experience. Don't waddle. Run. to wherever you can get this movie. Check it out. I got it digitally for $5. It's not that hard to find.
No.
It's worth the experience. And then when you're done watching this movie, head on over to Apple Podcast and leave a review for not just our show. We would certainly appreciate that, but every show that you listen to. It's something super fast, very fun, and free and easy you can do to help out the shows that you listen to every week. And I hope that includes our show. So say some nice things about us, and we will read that review on an episode. Leave a review for the Level Zero podcast. Be sure to check them out. It is so good. Can't recommend it enough. Again, check the episode description. You got links to all kinds of good stuff, including where you can find Preston Willke and a link to our Discord. Be sure you jump in there, because coming up December 11th, we are going to be watching The Punisher 1989, starring Dolph Lundgren, with all of you. It's going to be a great time. We hope to see you there. And until then, remember, maybe not every movie is great,
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. Thanks to Mitch of Depressed to Impress for the music. Check him out on YouTube and Twitch.tv. Thanks again to Preston Willke for being on this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share this episode with a friend and follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.